Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path. Welcome to the last video from the trip with Bruce up in the high country. So starting this video at the western end of Wonnangatta Valley, just where we finished the last video where the turn off to head north back out to Myrtleford is. So we head into the Wonnangatta Valley, stop off at the historic cemetery and the old Wonnangatta homestead site before making our way through the eastern end of the valley, and then out via the Humphrey River track. We don't follow that quite all the way to the end, heading up the Waterspur track and then back to Mount Selwyn. I don't get as much footage on this part of the track or trip as I would have liked, but we did capture some pretty cool stuff. The Humphrey River section of track between Wonnangatta and where we turn off on the Waterspur has, let me just count them now. So you cross the Wonnangatta River to get out of Wonnangatta Valley, and then after that you've got your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 river crossings of the Humphrey River. I think I got most of them on film, so we'll see how that goes. And that's not even the whole Humphrey River track, so we might go back sometime and try and get some better footage. I think the Sony camera was in Bruce's car, the GoPro was playing up and I was having to use it manually, and yeah, some of this was shot on phones, so they're getting a lot better than what they were. Anyway, let's get into the video, guys. Starting at the western end of Wonnangatta. Hope you enjoy this one. So here we are at the western end of Wonnangatta. That's the end of the Zika Spur track that we've just come down. You can see the sign there, Zika Track Howitt Plains, Wonnangatta Track, Wonnangatta Station. And that is the western exit from Wonnangatta, which should be maybe marked on this train. Yeah, Wonnangatta Track, Myrtleford. So I'm just waiting here for Bruce. I got a little bit ahead of him. I think he stopped on the track a few times, and then we'll be on our way. It's about 3:45, making reasonable time. Zika Spur takes a long time, there's no two ways about it. So here we are, making our way into the main Wonnangatta Valley. This first section, the track's a little bit elevated. This part of the valley does tend to get a little soft, and I don't think there's vehicle access down into that section of the valley at this point. I'm sure some people find their way down there. Just as we're making our way through to the open area where the cemetery and homestead are, a little bit of history. Can't claim to be an expert on Wonnangatta by any stretch, but it was originally a cattle station, and it was operated as a cattle station for quite some time. Until it was ultimately purchased. So I think it was originally established in about the 1850s, 1860s, and run by the Bryce family until Mrs. Bryce passed away in 1914, and I think she might have been one of the last people who were buried in the cemetery. Then it was sold to owners from Mansfield who had a manager run the property. So these days it is part of the National Park. It was actually sold back to National Parks. I think that happened in the 70s or perhaps the 80s. Well known for deer as well. So there's two of these river crossings, one at each end of the Wonnangatta Valley. If you didn't already know you're in the Wonnangatta Valley, you certainly do when you cross the rivers. These are This one in particular is usually pretty shallow, as is the other one. There was a fair bit of water around, as you're seeing here. We had a couple of days of rain, but it wasn't as soft as I've seen it. I've seen less water lying around and the track softer. It does get a lot of traffic, it's pretty popular, so it is fairly rutted and potholed. And as you can see just here, there's a lot of sections where there's more than one track sort of being pushed through the grassland. If you haven't been to Wonnangatta, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of different ways to get in there, and most of them are fairly manageable for just about any vehicle. Probably the easiest one is the western end from coming in from Myrtleford. What a view, eh? Can you imagine actually this being a functioning cattle station in the late 1800s and just how remote this must have been? It's hard enough to get here in a four-wheel drive today, but they didn't have that sort of luxury back then. And the work that must have gone in to clear this valley. Now you can just see on the left of shot there, that's one of the campsites down along the river there, with a long drop toilet installed, so there are those sort of facilities and amenities here. There has been some talk of upgrading those that I have heard from National Parks, and there's apparently possibly a project underway to rebuild the homestead, which would be pretty awesome. So these two pine trees here do sort of stand out, and they actually mark the location of the cemetery. There's not a lot of signage down here. I don't know if there has been signage in the past, and this side of the track up to the cemetery is always wet and there's always water around. The other side is less so. Signs on the railing there asking you to park your vehicles here and not try and drive right up to the cemetery. It is pretty wet, which is why they don't want vehicles going up there. We are pretty much in the middle of the Wonnangatta Valley. It's the remnants of the homestead over there, and that's the way east to the Humphrey River track, and that's where we've just come from. Just stopping here to check out the historic cemetery that's still here in Wonnangatta. As you can see, the cemetery is well maintained and cared for. Some of the headstones have been pieced back together, and you can see there a little bit of a story about Annie Bryce as one of the last people to be buried in the cemetery. I think that was 1914. It's not very far at all from the cemetery back to the homestead, just up at that tree line up ahead there. There's not much of the old homestead left to see. Some fencing is about it. There's a signboard there that lets you know where you are if you somehow arrived here and didn't know where you were. And this posted rail fence sort of fences the home site. The newer, more modern Wonnangatta hut and the original Wonnangatta homestead home site in amongst these trees here. There's not much of the homestead left after over 150 odd years. And you can see those pine trees in the distance. That's where the cemetery is, where we just were. Heading east from the homestead site, there's a number of tracks. That track there on the right doesn't really go anywhere. There's a few dead-end tracks that are old management vehicle tracks, I think. The track to the left heads down towards more camping areas, and straight ahead here there's a crossing of the river. Again, it's never been particularly deep. And this gets you on the track heading through the valley and out towards the eastern end. spots there on the right. You certainly don't lack for spaces to camp and find your own in Wonnangatta, that's for sure. And I think it was a good hour or so just traversing through the valley. Depending which route you take, you will run into these little water holes and bog holes and what have you. Now I believe the track on the right is the high ground track that's maybe a little drier, and this track here on the left that we've taken is closer to the river and tends to be wetter. I had actually intended to take the high ground track because I thought this might be wet and we were running out of time, but we ended up going this way, and it was fine. We didn't get stuck, so it does vary a lot through the valley, from the very wide open parts of the valley, more enclosed down this eastern end, that's for sure. And yeah, that fan belt was driving me nuts, particularly given I'd had the car serviced not long before this trip. Anyway, that's another story. Steep little pinch there. Nothing too difficult when you're a car by yourself, but you wouldn't want to be towing a trailer. And there's a lot of water on this part of the track, but it was a really firm base. We were not looking like getting stuck at all. I have seen that a lot softer. And this was a little bypass because there was a massive bog hole. I should have got some footage of it, just over there on the right. Another good sized puddle across the track. This one's a little bit more than a puddle. But like everything else, we've had to cross a good firm base. Bit of depth to it though. Before you get out of the valley, there is at least one section here where you do have to climb up and over a hill to get down the other side. So although you're working your way through a valley, there are a few climbs and descents, again particularly down this eastern end. I've seen them a little slipperier than they were on this particular day as well. Yeah, decently long climbs. You do get some nice views from some of these higher sections of track. The eastern end of the valley is very different to the western end, so while you can sneak in from the eastern end and go to the homestead and go to the cemetery site, to me it's well worth doing the eastern end if you can, and heading out via, whether you take Humphrey River, which is a great track to drive, as you'll see, or you can head out via Wombat Range or the Hart Spur track. There's a lot of different ways to get back out. And yeah, just as we're coming down there, that's the Wonnangatta River that you could just see in shot there. We haven't actually crossed out of the valley officially as yet, but we're not too far away from doing that. Just coming up here on the eastern Wanagata River crossing, so this is where most people consider the end of the Wanagata Valley. You'll note in this crossing there's a couple of rock stacks. They're pretty much always there. You really want to take your line between those. There's a few little rock shelves here, as you can probably see. Again, it's never been a particularly deep crossing, at least when I've driven it. It does have a bit of flow about it, but you want to stay, and you can see another rock there. You want to stay to the left of that when you're coming in this direction. Again, you're probably get across taking a different line, but that's definitely the recommended line. Just jumping out to catch Bruce coming across. River crossing at the eastern end of Wanagata. So from here we head north and onto the Humphrey River track, and it's not too long at all before we've got our first crossing of the Humphrey River. You can see the left side of the exit there is chewed up a little bit, so we just decided to try and hug the right. A little bit of mud coming up from the front tyres there, but I climbed up alright. So yeah, I have had a few people in the past ask me about taking camper trailers on the Humphrey River track. Look, I probably wouldn't. If you're in a convoy and you've got people in front and behind you that are prepared to help you, you might be okay. And if it's a particularly high clearance trailer, but as you'll see, some of these crossings, the entrances and exits aren't great. And this particular trip, the Humphrey River was actually up higher than I've ever driven it. It was fairly deep. Generally they've been shallow river crossings in the past when I've driven it, but this was after a week of rain, so it was up fairly high. Not crazy deep, but pretty high. So this is crossing number 2 of the Humphrey River. And this is a pretty easy one. Nice gentle slope in and out. You can see from the water there just how much it's actually flowing. Good thing with all these high country crossings is by and large they've got a good rocky base. Third crossing of the Humphrey River. As you can see, it's flowing well, but it's not super deep, quite manageable. I think this is the second Humphrey River crossing actually. The first one was the Wanagata River, which I might have been confused with that last shot. Anyway, a lot of river crossings. The terrain along the Humphrey River track changes a lot. You sort of drive through the bush. There's sections like this that are nice and open, and more enclosed sections. Again, there's a couple of little informal camp spots where you could very easily find yourself quite a nice camp spot. And here we are for the next, I'm going to call it the third Humphrey River crossing. Go and do the track, and I think you should count them. Some of these are quite long. as you can see. Yeah. So Bruce has gone ahead, and I think I dropped the footage maybe from Bruce in the top right. We'll see. Quite a long crossing, so there's a few like that where you actually sort of drive down the river just a little.
Beautiful. The mighty Pajero with Mr. Snyder Fuller at the helm. I like his line. He's doing it just like me. A little bit downstream coming up into it. There it is. It's deep. Nice work. Woohoo! Beautiful.
So after that crossing, that's the turn off there on the right, as you can see coming up on screen there, to the Hartspur and the Wombat Range track. So Hartspur will take you up towards Mount Sarah, and the Wombat Range track takes you back sort of Mount Cynthia, over to Eagle Vale and Billy Goats Bluff and what have you. So this is a little tributary here that actually flows into the Humphrey River, not actually a Humphrey River crossing. So I think we're still on 3. As I said, pretty sure there's 10 between Wonnangatta and the Waterspur track, but I'm not sure if I got footage of all of them. So we'll call this number 4. So if you're thinking about tracks with lots of river crossings in the high country, everybody thinks about Crooked River, but Waterspur's got just as many. You can probably see on the approach there, this entrance is a little bit torn up from people coming back the other way. So that's why I'm taking it slow and steady, just to edge my way down. And again, there's a good bit of flow, but you're driving sort of into it. But that's the deepest one so far. And again, the exit this side is a little torn up on the right, so we take that left line where there's some rocks, and straight up and out of there. So this is the same crossing, me just filming Bruce coming down, so you get a good shot looking back there of just how torn up that entrance and exit is. And that's what I'm saying, you know, it's not that you couldn't do this with a camper trailer, it's just not going to be real easy, and I wouldn't choose to do it myself, I don't think. Maybe if you got a 200 series with a V8 and plenty of power. I think Bruce quite enjoyed this trip. I don't think he'd done a lot of river crossings prior to this trip, but he certainly has now. We had done some on, you can see the watermark on the car up over the front of the bonnet, and a good 2/3 of the way up the door, down the side. Yeah, I was just thinking, Bruce was on the Mount Sarah trip, and we came out via Crooked River, so he's done a few there. He's certainly got some practice doing a few more. And some sections of the track like this, parallel along the river, you know a crossing is coming up fairly quickly. And again, this one's another one that's a fairly easy entrance and exit, sort of straight in. A little bit off camber there. And there's some inset footage from Bruce. It's great having him along to take some of this extra external footage. His iPhone does a really good job, actually. And yeah, as you can see, a couple of sections like this, it's really not too long. This is all pretty much the same take, so you drive onto this little peninsula, and then there's another crossing. And again, this one's been dug out just a little bit. And as you're coming down into it like this, you can't actually see the exit yet. You're sort of wondering, okay, where am I going? But it's up to the right. So this is one of the ones where you drive down the river. You can see it there coming into frame now. Another one where the exit on the right hand side there has been dug out just a little bit, so I thought, you know, we'll put one tyre on the left and try and drive up it. But that wasn't to be. The back wheels have just sort of slid off it, and I think that front left was probably just up off the ground there, so a little bit limited for traction. So you can imagine trying to do this with a camper trailer. It wouldn't be great, whether you're trying to go the direction we're going or whether you're coming the other direction. So I'm just hugging that left bank a little more. A bit of right pedal, and we're up and out of there. So this is that same crossing with Bruce coming across now. Easing his way nicely down that entrance into the river. And I'm going to say he's had the benefit of watching me do this exit, and he just hugs that left bank and he's straight up and out of there. That's the way. I did think he was going to collect one of those trees there, but apparently he knows just how big his vehicle is. And I bet you're surprised, there's another river crossing. Another one driving down just a little bit, not quite as deep as some of the others. And this one's got a little tributary flowing in on the right hand side just near the exit here. This section here does climb up away from the river just a little bit, so I'm not sure why the track historically goes in this direction and doesn't keep following the river, but the river's down at the base of the valley there to the left, so it is a decent little climb up here, but you do get some great views, as you'll see. You can probably also see there's a fallen tree blocking the track here, so it looks like it'll come down, and one of the recent storms, maybe the rain had softened the ground up a little bit, and it's hit the ground and just broken into a number of pieces. So didn't need to get the saws out for that. We were able to just jump out and move a few pieces out of the way, and there was a bit of a clear path then to be had through the remains that's left there. Happy to take a bit of time and move a few sticks out of the way, because I've done 2 CV boots in this thing, both of them from sticks jamming up and tearing the CV boots. So yeah, worth a couple of minutes to move them out of the way. So cresting that hill, working our way now back down towards the river, and yeah, cracking view down through this valley. I think by this point we were getting probably close to 5:30, something like that. We ended up a much longer day driving today than we were expecting. But that's what happens when you improvise. So just coming down here to the old Humphrey River shelter, which is part way along this track. Quite a popular camping spot, and as you see, I think somebody might have been camping here just recently. Here we are at the Humphrey River shelter on the Humphrey River track. There it is just there. As you can see, somebody was camping here pretty recently. There's a good supply of firewood still here. Shame we're not looking for a campsite tonight. Quite a good open sort of area here. Looks like a clothesline, pre-installed. Possibly retaining wires actually holding that structure up. Pretty cool old structure built with round timber. And that's Bruce coming along the Humphrey River track in his 200. So as I understand it, the Humphrey River shelter was originally built as just an open shelter for cattle drovers back when cattle used to be driven into the Wanangata Valley. These days it's a great little camp spot and commonly used by deer hunters. Certainly on the trips I've done, I've seen one or two hunting parties camping here. So my GoPro is getting to the end of its storage. So yet another river crossing not too far after the Humphrey River shelter, and Bruce basically followed me straight in and is shooting this from his phone mounted on a dash mount. So me reaching out my car window there, that was turning the GoPro on and off because it was having problems linking with the phone, and yeah. I'm just glad that we're still able to get some footage. It's just another amazing part of the high country, and I think coming in via or exiting via Humphrey River would have to be my favourite. It's a nicer drive than Zika Spur. Time goes a lot more quickly. It's not as rocky and bumpy. And you've probably got some slightly better views from most of the Humphrey River track. And again, coming in or out this way, if you haven't done it before, you've got the option of going up Waterspur, which is a really fun steep track, and then up to Mount Selwyn summit on the way out, which is well worth it. I've done one or two videos, I think, on the Mount Selwyn summit. Surprisingly, I'm sure, we've got yet another river crossing here. So again, got some footage from Bruce, which was great. It's really good having him along to pick up a little bit of extra external footage. Just a short little one, not too deep either, deeper than some, and another tributary there flowing in.
Kind of a dual crossing.
Well done.
A little deeper bog hole there than I was sort of expecting.
Pretty cool crossing that one, eh?
Yeah, it was really good with the other creek coming in.
You can see that sun starting to get low in the sky, And again, there's nothing particularly difficult on this sort of later section of Humphrey River, but it's a really nice drive through the bush. Sometimes there's puddles, sometimes there's not. It's a really good time of day, except for the fact that we had a long way still to go ahead of us to actually get home back to Albury.
Another one.
We're filming.
This is another one you drive down the river.
So yeah, as you just probably heard on the radio, if that came through on the final edit, it's another crossing where you actually head down the river and then exit, and this one's a bit slippery as well. And yes, we've still got another river crossing. I think by this point my GoPro had called it quits. I think I actually filled up the SD cards, which has never happened before. Live and learn. Fortunately for the variety trip coming up, I've bought about 5 extra SD cards, so live and learn. Just a nice short, shallow one, this one. Reasonably steep exit, again, run it out there. Easy enough if you are able to span it the way we did. But yeah, you could drop a wheel in that rut and you'd find yourself in a bit of grief, I think.
Yeah, it was a nice little crossing, eh?
Very smooth.
Hello. Ah, yes, this is B1.
So, as you might have guessed from that radio chatter, there's another tree down, but this one I think's been here a little while, and there's already a fairly established track running around, so we followed suit.
If we had more time, I'd get the chainsaw out and move him.
We could have 2 saws going.
That's it.
So this I think is on the Waterspur track, and this is the last bit of footage that I've got. This is shot on my phone. This is a really steep clay hill, as you can tell from those ruts, prone to being quite slippery. Bruce did a great job driving up this, spanning the ruts, so spanning the rut on the left hand side there on the first section of the climb, and then crossing over and spanning the other one and managing not to slip in. Really good drive. And from there we actually had quite a ways to go still on our trip, but unfortunately that's the end of the footage. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Certainly enjoyed this trip. It was an amazing trip. Just a shame I didn't have somebody along to be a bit more of a dedicated cameraman. See you in the next one, and it's only a couple of weeks now as I'm editing this that I'll be heading off on the variety trip, so looking forward to that one. Not sure how I'm going to edit that together yet, but we'll figure that out. Please like this video if you liked it. Leave a comment down below if you know how many river crossings there actually were. I'm pretty sure it's 10. If you've got any questions, hit me up, and please subscribe to the channel. We're nearly up to 600 subscribers now, which is awesome. Thank you so much to everybody who does subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. See you in the next video.